How, why, what, when did you get involved with construction tech?
Yeah, my background is in construction. So I studied civil engineering at Penn State in the U.S. And then I got a job as a project manager, working as a client rep for ultra wealthy families. Um, I think when you work with that caliber of customer, you're constantly in a mode of trying to impress them. And honestly, I don't know a better way of impressing anyone or improving someone's experience other than with technology, especially in project management. And that's really what got me into construction tech.
So what was the first maybe you could tell us like what sector is then, and then perhaps what the earlier days looked like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sector really makes sure that companies don't waste billions on technologies that they buy and that they never use. For us, technology must always equal profitability. So
Hmm.
what we do is we automate the critical processes that drive adoption, so that technology always delivers results. And we find that companies too often gamble with their tech investments, and we just make sure that never happens.
Okay, so who's using sector?
Yeah, quite a few big name customers, companies, general contractors like Ferrovial and Vinci are customers of Sector. Most of our customers are actually engineering consultancies, companies like Parsons, AECOM, Ramble, and so on.
A bit philosophical question maybe, but is it like intrinsic issue with technology that there is a need for someone to pull things together for the technology provider and for the recipient of this technology to just make it work for the recipient? Like, is it not? Do you think about it at all, or not?
You know, it would be great if technology was just something you deployed and it just worked, and you had to put zero effort into it. Um, you have to get used to it. It brings change, not only to the way you work, but the entire organization. And I think that was the light bulb moment for us as Sector. In the beginning, when we were doing, let's say, single tech deployments, we'd only, let's say, go and do a deployment of Procore and help our customer adopt Procore. Um, we realized that they weren't just adopting Procore, they were changing the way that they worked. They were used to working in a certain way, making a certain number of phone calls, printing, a certain number of documents. And then all of a sudden that changed completely and they had to buy iPads and they had to use their phones more and call less and so on and so forth. Um, so because, Martin, the change management process is part of this, I think, it's not as intuitive as people think it would be. But sector's goal and sector's purpose is to make it, to make this multi-platform cultural change aspect of technology just as intuitive.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bricks and Bytes podcast, where we dive into construction and AEC technology. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode. This episode is brought to you by Build Vision, transforming construction supply chain by bringing contractors, manufacturers, and stakeholders onto a single software platform. Visit buildvision.io to find out more. So good afternoon, Angelos. I'm glad that you are back in London and we managed to do this. We were very grateful of your effort last week dialing in from Saudi, but maybe they put some blockers on the internet connection, which means we postponed by a week.
By the way, only in Saudi Arabia, I've never seen, in a business class lounge, I've never seen a VIP room that, it was fully stocked with everything you'd ever want. That's where I went. But yeah, there was no internet connection. That kind of sucked.
Yeah, it's got everything you want except Wi-Fi.
Except-
The only thing you probably want in the 2025, huh?
100%.
So
100%.
how was
It's
this
great to
trip?
be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, how was this trip? Like, what's happening in Saudi Arabia for you?
Yeah, the trip was fantastic. We went both to Dubai and Saudi, to see our clients, speak with, new clients potentially. Saudi Arabia has a lot of energy right now, a lot of big, super exciting projects that are actually being built. I hear a lot of comments, is that actually real? Yeah, a lot of stuff is happening. And for us, it was particularly interesting. I think there's a big race now to make sure that the tech companies get adopted, and that's what we're focused on. So yeah, it was super exciting from our end as well.
Yeah,
Have you
okay.
got customers there, or you are looking for customers there?
Yeah, we do. We are on currently a little over 100 projects right now, and doubling this year already with signed agreements.
Very good. So shall we dive into perhaps what the service looks like? So could you tell us, I'll actually just take a step back and why perhaps, how, this is my question. So answer it how you like. And I'm going to read it verbatim. How, why, what, when did you get involved with construction tech?
Yeah, my background is in construction. So I studied civil engineering at Penn State in the U.S., and then I got a job as a project manager, working as a client rep for ultra wealthy families. I think when you work with that caliber of customer, you're constantly in a mode of trying to impress them. And honestly, I don't know a better way of impressing anyone or improving someone's experience other than with technology, especially in project management. And that's really what got me into construction tech. And then what we realized was a lot of companies were buying technology and not using it, not realizing any profits from it. And that's when we started to focus on tech adoption, building sector.
Mm-hmm. So you was working. So did you start building it whilst you was working there?
No, I left my job and I started this. It was a very big decision, big and hard decision as well, because my wife had given birth to our first child as well at the same time, and
Nice.
she worked for a large general contractor which went bankrupt at that time as well. So yeah, it was a big decision
It wasn't.
to quit and start.
Who was it Carillion?
No, it was a Cyprus-based company called JMP.
Okay.
They were actually quite large. They were doing about 4 billion in turnover at the time.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what was the first maybe you could tell us like what sector is then, and then perhaps what the earlier days looked like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sector really makes sure that companies don't waste billions on technologies that they buy and that they never use. For us, technology must always equal profitability. So what we do is we automate the critical processes that drive adoption, so that technology always delivers results. And we find that companies too often gamble with their tech investments, and we just make sure that never happens.
Mm-hmm.
Are you involved? Sorry, mind before these companies buy the tech, or are you typically bought in when they bought it and gone, oh shit, we don't know how to use this?
Very often they get in touch with us when they're thinking of buying a tech or they have no idea what they want to buy. And also very often they reach out and said, hey guys, we bought this piece of technology last year and we have one project using it, and we want to increase adoption.
So can you give us like an example of a customer's journey for this use case, so that someone has bought something and they use one project and they have very bad ROI on this technology, and they call you, and like what happens next?
Yeah, that happens all the time. It's actually our most common use case. What happens next is we typically make an assessment of what goes on, how much they're using their tech, what they wanted it to be. We also add our knowledge of how most customers or the best users of this technology are profiting from the tech, and then we connect the processes with workflows, and then we start the process of training everyone, getting everything, getting the technology adopted, and reporting on process, on progress. If you're realizing a profit from this technology or not. Sometimes.
Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks and Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
A year in, the customer will say, "Well, okay, clearly this technology is not for me," and that's fine. But at least at that point, we know exactly what they want, and we can make that pivot very, very fast.
And is it a digital process of determining if this is the right tool for them, or this process? I guess there's some interviews required and trying to pull all of the pieces together, or is it automated?
Yeah, it's an automated process for us. We go through a process of both capturing their screens, understanding how they work. Our meetings are recorded. We put everything in one place on a unified platform. And then the adoption process is also there's also quite a lot of automation there. It's not fully automated at this point, but that's certainly where it's headed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so who's using Sektor?
Yeah, quite a few big name customers, companies, general contractors like Ferrovial and Vinci are customers of Sektor. Most of our customers are actually engineering consultancies, companies like Parsons, AECOM, Ramble, and so on.
That's it. I mean, something interesting. I wouldn't say that these people need coaching, but seems like it is. So you're kind of opening a new angle for me to look at these things. So what
not really coaching, Martin?
I know
firepower. It's firepower. That's what they need. If you look at the size of their innovation teams, it's typically 5 people maximum. Coming up with the strategies of innovation, and then they have to drive adoption for 30,000. Parsons has 20,000 people, 5,000 in the Middle East, 5,500. Ferrovial is a 30,000 person company. Vinci, 100,000 people. A 3-person innovation team is not going to do much, and they need to come up with all the strategy. So that's something Sektor doesn't do. They bounce ideas off the wall with us, but we're fully focused on adoption.
But why? This may be a stupid question. Like, why do they not just go and hire like another innovation manager or something? What do you guys do that perhaps someone like another innovation manager doesn't?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you need too many. You need too many of them. You might, some of these projects, we were in Saudi Arabia for King Salman's new international airport. That is a $40 billion project. You might need 10 innovation managers on a project like that if you do it manually. If you introduce automation, then it becomes a lot easier. So essentially, it's a lot cheaper to do it through us. There's also less risk for them, because if that innovation manager leaves, then they take the knowledge with them. Whereas if you have Sektor doing it for you, then you have continuation of knowledge. You own the knowledge.
So can you tell us how is it set up? So because it feels to me that they get in touch with you, you help them solve the problem, you help them find the right tech, you help them manage this tech, and then you should go. They should be able to figure it out. Or is it more sticky? Or how long are you staying with the customer usually?
Yeah, we usually stay we've never lost any customer. Let me just say that. We usually stay throughout, because what we do is we also provide support. I mean, if you think about how a customer uses technology, it's usually a multi-platform approach. So most of our customers use a combination of, let's say, Aconex plus Autodesk, or Autodesk plus Procore, and then they have all the point solutions. They'll have an open space, they might have build-outs, they might have Cubics, and so on and so forth. And then there's knowledge that exists, between those tools. So if you go and ask for support to, one of those vendors, they'll be able to help you with the tool, but not the overall process. I was giving you guys the example earlier when we were talking about, how do I get my drawings approved? Usually that's a process that might start in email, or Aconex, and, finish off in Autodesk Construction Cloud, for instance. So Sektor has that knowledge that connects the various platforms. And when they ask us for support, they get very fast answers.
How did you build this knowledge, and how did you build this IP that you have and we don't have?
Yeah, with a lot of pain, being in the customer's shoes. Before we developed our platform, we were doing this very, very manually, and then we realized we don't like the way, let's say, digital transformation consultancies work. We don't believe in the model of charging for man hours. We think that's totally archaic. And we decided to automate this process. And yeah, I guess just by being close to the customer, you get to understand what their need is and build around it.
Do they ask? Are they asking questions about maybe ask if you could possibly give an example of the typical questions people are asking on the platform?
Yeah, they'll typically ask general questions around how to complete a certain process. It's not really how do I use. In the beginning, we might get some of those questions that say, how do I use, let's say, Autodesk Construction Cloud, or how do I use Procore's meetings module, for instance. We do get those kind of questions, but that's in the beginning. Usually the questions that we get, and say 80% of the questions that we get, are all around the processes. What does my company want me to do? Or how do other projects do this? And that's where we help them quite a lot. If you think about the construction industry, every project is it's kind of like a new startup, right? And new team, new processes, new everything, and you build everything from scratch from the very beginning. And we just help make that process much smoother.
Angelos, you mentioned that charging per hour is a totally archaic concept. What is the right concept, you think? And yeah, how do you perceive that?
Yeah, we think the subscription model is much better.
From which side?
From which type?
From which side? From the customer's point of view, who is paying towards a subscription, or from the receiver of the subscription?
Well, it depends. If you're for the customer, it's absolutely better. It's absolutely better. It's there's more, let's say, transparency. You're not going to go up and down unless you're buying a new product. And it's up to the company providing the service to make sure that they deliver the service efficiently. As a customer, what you care about is getting the result that that you expect, right? If a company manages to do that with half the resources, as long as you're getting the result on time and with high quality, then you're good. You're happy to pay for it. Generally, our concept is, we always believe that technology should be cheap. We don't believe you should be paying a lot of money for technology. That's the benefit of technology. It's able to bring down the costs. So I think for the consumer, it's absolutely a benefit. For the companies delivering the service, it's up to them. If they deliver the service manually, then obviously it's not to their benefit. If you're delivering the service, thinking in manual man-hour terms, then it's not to your benefit. But if you're in the mode of, I'm going to make everything automated, everything more efficient, I'm going to, deliver only tech-enabled services. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean I'm using Outlook or I'm using Microsoft Word and therefore I'm tech-enabled. It means I've developed a platform of my own that I depend on to deliver my service. Then in that case, the subscription model, it might add more pressure to you, but I think it makes you better.
Okay.
Okay. Go on, man. You were going to follow.
I wanted to jump into something you mentioned actually when we had a little chat before we started recording. There is a massive race to adopt AI.
Massive.
So I guess
Massive.
you hear that from your customers. They have too much technology around them. And like, what's your opinion on that?
There's just a statistic that blew my mind. The fastest company in the past to ever adopt to ever get to 1 million users was Facebook, and it took them 12 months. It took them 12 months to get to 1 million users. Then it was Instagram. It took Instagram 1 month to get to 1 million users. ChatGPT got to 1 million users in 4 days.
Yeah.
So the massive race to adopt AI is coming from the end user, I think, because they just find AI so useful. It just makes sense. It's intuitive. It's fast to see the benefits that you get, and companies want it.
Yeah, but consumer is usually much faster than the business, right?
Yeah.
So you're seeing this race to adopt AI from your customers' side, right? So I guess they are looking and searching for technologies to better their businesses.
Yeah. Think about, let's say, if you think about a company buying smartphones for its employees. I mean, you remember those days. It took a while for us to get to to understand, what a smartphone actually is. And people in the beginning, they were like, well, I have my BlackBerry and, it's all right. And that's how companies were thinking and so on and so forth. And if you think about the process of buying this physical product, it takes a while, right? You're like, all right, I'm going to see the iPhone. I'm going to go try it out in the Apple Store. I'm going to go buy it. Maybe that's a 6-month, maybe that's a 12-month process. And it's only after those 12 months that the conversations start, seeping upwards. And at some point, the board of directors says, all right, we're going to buy, smartphones for everyone. Mm-hmm. With software, with ChatGPT, it's a much faster process. Somebody tells you, you can instantly use it, instantly see the results. It could happen that in a week, 10, 50, 100 people in your company are having that conversation around that. So the time that it takes for that need to adopt AI to translate from the user to the board of directors, it's much shorter.
I thought maybe we can come back to that, but before we go into the tech, the people that you're using, Angelos, how do you guys typically get onto a company's radars? Is it mostly through referrals or previous network within the industry?
Yeah, it's mostly referrals and networks. Networking through the industry. There's no heavy outreach happening from Sektor yet. Maybe.
How many people do you have working for you?
Right now we are 12.
Okay, interesting. Very good. Okay, dokie. So maybe now we can move on to the tech and what do you guys see? Because obviously we're working with however many customers that you are, and they're all of a similar archetype, right? Large engineering companies. So are they all using the same tech, or similar? Maybe not same tech companies, but similar output.
Yeah. So if you look at the construction tech space, it's about $8 billion annually. Around a little over 50% of that comes from 5 companies. It's basically Autodesk, Oracle, Procore, Trimble, and Nemetschek. Those guys make the bulk of that 8 billion, and then the rest comes from another 10,000 companies. So 5 companies make most of it, and then 10,000 make, the rest. So I would categorize it in 2 types. There's basic tech that is, very universally used. Procore, Aconex, Autodesk. These platforms are universally used, and sometimes they're used together. There's many companies who have both an Aconex and an Autodesk Construction Cloud subscription, both an Autodesk and the Procore subscription, A-Site plus Procore, Dialex plus Procore plus A-Site. You see quite a lot of that, happening. I would say the discrepancies happen on the point solution space. There are clear winners in certain categories. I think OpenSpace has been doing a great job in the 360 space. Companies like Fieldwire and PlanRadar, in their own respective regions, are doing great jobs, dominating certain aspects of the market. But yeah, generally, there is that base layer tech, and then there is quite a lot of differentiation on the point solution space.
Mm-hmm.
So is it like is it because I think you mostly mentioned like did we just I'm still not sure whether we describe Procore as an ERP, but project management solution, huh? At least.
Yeah. I think Procore it's certainly the leader in the US of project management tools, and it's making big moves in Europe for sure.
Are you like mostly seeing that? Are these mostly the techs that you guys are helping with, like the project management solutions and the reality capture? You didn't mention things like I don't know. I always use robotics as an example, but
we know that.
Yeah.
The basic tech, or let's say most of the technology that we support with are project management tools, ERP deployments. Now there's quite a lot of Microsoft Copilot adoption that we're supporting with. We're a Copilot a Microsoft partner for Copilot adoption. Gemini adoption we're seeing with the customers that use Google Workspace as their tool of choice as well.
Your customers use Google? That's crazy.
Yeah, I'm surprised to see that too. The construction sector is very much dominated by Microsoft.
Also, when we spoke to people recently, man, and they say, "Oh, we send them like a Google sheet," and they're like, "Oh, we can't access it." It's like, oh,
yeah.
Angelos, a bit philosophical question maybe, but is it like intrinsic issue with technology that there is a need for someone to pull things together for the technology provider and for the recipient of this technology to just make it work for the recipient? Like, is it not? Do you think about it at all, or not?
It would be great if technology was just something you deployed and it just worked, and you had to put zero effort into it. You have to get used to it. It brings change, not only to the way you work, but the entire organization. And I think that was the light bulb moment for us as Sektor. In the beginning, when we were doing, let's say, single tech deployments, we'd only, let's say, go and do a deployment of Procore and help our customer adopt Procore. We realized that they weren't just adopting Procore, they were changing the way that they worked. They were used to working in a certain way, making a certain number of phone calls, printing, a certain number of documents. And then all of a sudden that changed completely, and they had to buy iPads and they had to use their phones more and call less and so on and so forth. So because, Martin, the change management process is part of this, I think it's not as intuitive as people think it would be. But Sektor's goal and Sektor's purpose is to make it, to make this multi-platform cultural change aspect of technology just as intuitive.
So you are like designing Sektor towards being a platform, or is it like a platform supported by consultancy? Like, what's the model here?
Yeah, the model is we're disrupting ourselves. That's exactly how we see it. We started as a by providing a pure service, and then we said, all right, this is we don't like this. We are anti this model. So let's disrupt ourselves. Let's make sure we don't have to hire 100 engineers when we get a new agreement for 1,000 projects.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. I find it quite fascinating actually that despite how much tech is available on the market, the people that you're working with are only really using like a few core tools, and even when they're using those tools, they need someone like you to come and tell them how to use it more profitable. I find that quite or to like use it to its maximum efficiency or capacity, whatever you want to call it. Which is like, is it like you just said anti to what you were doing, but is it anti to like the industry perhaps and all these point solutions and tech that shows up everywhere?
Look, I'm a huge fan of technology. I think we should be using as much technology as we can. There is, there is that notion of overusing technology. I think that's absolutely a thing. So, yeah, if you ask me, I think it's people are just too busy, and they don't have time. And in an industry like construction that's so complex, you just need someone to take care of that for you. And if they can take care of that for you with a low cost and give you transparency and in a way that makes sense, and you can monitor and understand if you're benefiting from tech or not, I think that's great value, and you can move really fast.
How do you think about charging like towards your customer? Is it per like a percentage of their subscription fees somehow, or how do you think about it?
It's a percentage of the tech that we manage. So it's based on the technology that we manage. It's a fee based on that.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come up with that?
We were always trying to think, all right, what's the pricing model that we can come up with that would cost our customers as little as possible, but also ensure that Sektor can grow and flourish and develop products. And yeah, we tried a few things, and it was the one that really stuck with our customers. It's quite funny, building a startup. One of the processes you go through is the pricing model. What's the right or the wrong one?
Mm-hmm.
And the feedback is very instant. It's kind of like you see it in the call. You're like, ooh, I'm not going to go there. You're like, oh, okay, I guess that didn't work out.
There's only one way to find out, though, right? Literally, just put it on the table.
Buy, forget about it. You can't be under, no illusions.
And I think correct me if I'm wrong, because you have better memory for these things. But I think Patrick Hellerman recently said that he spoke with someone from like a larger organization, and they basically are thinking about consolidation of their tech, and they don't want to buy another solution because it's a headache. Was it a conversation with Patrick, Owen, or?
I think I've had that conversation with more than one person.
Okay, so let's make it more generic, right? So we hear there is a tendency to think about consolidating technology to perhaps solutions which are covering more than just one point solution, and then you have lots of logins, lots of people who move on and they're gone. You need to replace them, etc. What is your feeling about what I just said? Is it what you see as well, that there's like a technology fatigue or software fatigue perhaps, or that's not what you hear and feel around you?
What I certainly see is that there's certainly consultant fatigue. So, I'll take that out of the way. There's certainly consultant fatigue. With technology...
What does it mean, consultant fatigue?
they don't want to pay consultants anymore. There's like a big
Okay.
anti-consultant movement happening right now, especially in digital transformation. It's kind of insane. There's books written about it now. The Big Con, if you've read it, there's you see governments everywhere. The UK started, last year, 2 years ago, started, let's say, an anti-consultant movement in the UK. In the US now, you have Elon's Doge, saying that they're gonna, get rid of all the consultants. So I'll say that, in digital transformation, there's certainly that, that movement happening right now. Now, when it comes to purchasing SaaS, purchasing software products, we certainly went from, a few years ago, or let's say a few decades ago, I think many companies were under the impression, all right, I'm going to go with, one of the big guys, Oracle, IBM, whatever. I'm going to buy everything from them. And it was like a nice feeling to have. But then, all these other tools started coming out, and then, marketplaces started coming out. And, just look at your phone. There was a point where, people just downloaded and bought everything, and it was a spike, right? It kind of went, it was kind of like a hockey stick. It was flat, and then it went up, quite high. And now I think the point where it's at, it's that it's still growing, but I think it's not, companies are not buying technologies at the pace that they used to. They probably realize they're buying a lot of tech and they're not using it as much. And, and maybe they should consolidate some of that tech, but it's certainly not the case that they're not buying new tech. They absolutely are. They're just not buying new tech at the pace that they used to. And consolidation is very much a part of that process. But we're, with that consolidation information and, conversation, I think it's important to mention, we're also seeing, big conversations around the integration of various tools. And it's, it's not a nice to have, it's a requirement. Can you integrate, if you're a point solution, can you integrate with Autodesk Construction Cloud? Can you integrate with Procore? And if you can't, many companies just don't even consider it.
Yeah, I've heard a few similar things. Even like not even just the tech tools. Someone was saying to me the other day that they wanted a solution to integrate with Airtable, and it didn't.
Yeah.
And it was like a massive output for them. And I was like, that's quite interesting, actually.
Yeah.
Thinking about generic tech. Angela, so do people, like when people are asking you about tech to adopt, and they say they want a solution for a problem that they're encountering, like, are you also assessing the technology vendors and saying like, no, they're not good, or yes, they're good?
We don't like to say that they're not good, because
You can be honest.
look, I mean, there's certainly, if somebody was like, well, you have to give an answer, I guess I would.
You have to give an answer.
You have to give an answer, I guess I would. Look, there's right and wrong tech, for everyone, right? There's companies that say, I want that, I don't care what it is, I want a local technology. It has to be a local vendor. I don't want to use the best. I want a local vendor. I want to support the local community, for instance. Then, the best tech is probably, in that case, that could mean there's only one local vendor. So, if that's what you want to use, there have been cases where we said, look, we don't want to, we don't want to provide adoption support for this platform. Because, if the platform's that bad, then we will look bad as well. But I think most, most decisions are, are sensible. As far as, as far as our evaluation goes, we do that, completely for free for our customers. We don't sell strategy. Or, we don't sell, let's say, comparison of tools as a service. It is part of our approach. And when customers ask us, we just give them that information. And we have quite a lot of inbound requests. Hey, what do you think about this platform and that platform? And we have ready-made reports that we give out to customers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, and anything else on this?
I don't think so. I really wanted to ask you perhaps about some specific case studies with some clients. Like, do you guys measure the results like before and after you come in? Like, what does it look like from someone? And maybe like, have you joined a company where they're literally using nothing, and then you're like, okay, this is how we're gonna do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Measuring is a big part of the sector process. We have what we call our adoption intelligence index, which is a formula that is made up of the number of users that you add on on a particular platform or on various platforms over a certain period of time, multiplied by their engagement level, multiplied by the expected performance that you expect to have. And that just measures the velocity with which you're adopting and benefiting from a technology. I think it's a very important part of our story and of the story that we want to be developing with our customers. Are you benefiting from this technology or not? And to answer your other question as well, there are customers that we joined that don't use anything. There was a customer that we recently signed with that they were looking into project management tools, and when we saw their back office, we said, guys, first and foremost, we need to organize your back, all of your existing tech stack. That needs to be organized. Your Microsoft suite, you're barely using any of the capabilities of your Microsoft Office suite right now. You could be using Copilot for half this stuff, using SharePoint to take advantage, save a lot of money. Fix that first. Learn how to use digital by default, and then we go to to more advanced solution.
It seems like it's lack of processes.
Yeah. So is there like an example that you could give us where someone was like, I don't know, adopted a certain tech like OpenSpace or Procore, perhaps is one that you mentioned previously, and what the outcome was for them?
Yeah, I think Parsons is a there's a couple of excellent case studies with Parsons, but one that that popped into my mind immediately was that with Parsons we managed to increase the number of inspections on a per project basis by 30%. In some cases, that means that Parsons is able to deliver 500 more inspections than before per month. And a lot of times we're worried that, oh my gosh, tech is going to come in and AI is going to come in and it's going to take it's going to take over my job or it's going to replace me. But if we look at and if we look at if we look at the work that we do, we waste so much time on administrative tasks, low value activities, and tech can really get rid of all those tasks and help us focus more on on the core job and on the high value activities that we can do.
I just find it mind blowing, honestly, that these big companies have these people, but they're just not using this technology. Like, what are they doing?
Yeah, it's true. And the frustrating part is that it's the customer who pays for it at the end, and it's the taxpayers who pay for it at the end, and the experience is just is so bad.
Angelos, how often the problems that you helping solve your customers are repetitive on day-to-day work of Sektor, and how often these are like completely new cases that you deal with?
I would say 80% is repetitive. 20% is completely new. Most of the issues we face are very, very repetitive issues that have to do mostly with change management, internal politics, cultural clashes, et cetera, et cetera.
Did you set up any benchmarks for adoption of particular solutions for particular type of persona or customer, which like help them or you guide them towards certain outcomes?
Yeah, absolutely. We train per type of per type of user, but it really depends on the company whether we go bottom up or top down. We found that in the Middle East, it's much more effective to go top down. In let's say the UK, bottom up works just as much as the Middle East. Just as much as top down. So quite more equal, but certainly not as well as bottom up works in the US. So I would say the US has been historically the most let's say bottom up forward type of customer. Europe is more balanced. There is the open-mindedness of the US and the culture for innovation, but it's much more bureaucratic, much more conservative than the US is, and the Middle East. It's much more hierarchical, and I think part of that is the speed with which these projects are being built. There's new talent coming in or new labor coming in in a very fast pace in the Middle East. So you barely have time to they basically have to go through. They're in a constant process of training, teaching, getting people to get used to the the project, etc. So yeah, it's quite different there. They don't have time to sit and and think about tech. It has to be, let's say, top down.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to touch on speaking of these different geographies and different approaches. How did your go-to-market differs in between those regions?
Our go-to-market is it is pretty standard, to be honest. It's been the same, mostly because our the way we go to these regions is with the same type of customer. Our customers are global companies. So let's say our first US projects started with Ferrovial, who is our Spanish-based customer that now does most of the work in the US, the Middle East. Our first customer in the Middle East was AECOM, which is an American company. We work a lot with Parsons in the Middle East, who's also an American company but has worked in Europe. So does AECOM, Ramble, etc. So yeah.
Yeah. Who do you like when you're going to these companies? I can't imagine you just send a cold email and they're like, "Yeah, we want to use you."
No, that doesn't work with us.
what's the like process there?
It's word of mouth. It's word of mouth with us. A lot of times, it's an introduction from one of our vendor partners. So let's say Procore might make an introduction. Hey, I'm about to launch on this new project. Let's work together on it. It might also be that, for instance, one of our vendor partners is trying to get into the project. Let's say OpenSpace is trying to get into the project, and we saw that, or into the customer, and they saw that we're actually working with that customer with a different technology. So a lot of connections happen in that way, and the industry has quite a lot of turnover and bouncing around. Companies are leaving. People are leaving one company going to the other.
Yeah.
Which is part of the problem, by the way. It's a big part of the problem, in my opinion. That what's the difference between the big consultancies? It's the same. If it's the same people, changing a company every 2-3 years, what's the difference?
Shouldn't be any.
Yeah, in theory, there shouldn't be any. So a lot of them, when they change the company, they'll take us with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of my questions was about your market size, like TAM, which is total addressable market for you.
Market,
yeah, for you. But like when you're explaining that these companies are global companies, then the TAM is still big, even if it's 150 companies. It's not many, but they have lots of projects and lots of different regions to cover.
Yeah.
Do you envisage this? Yes, thank you. Do you think about going towards smaller size of companies, perhaps in the future, to scale your operations?
Yeah, we do have a few customers, I would say, in the mid market. I do see us going there as well. I think and I'll tell you why. I think one of the trends that's happening now is that with AI, small companies or smaller companies are able to deliver much bigger projects. So maybe a smaller consultancy will not be able to deliver, let's say, 100% of the product that, say, an AECOM would deliver. But with AI, they can get to 80%, but at a much lower cost, a much lower price point. And the customers are quite positively received that. They're like, all right, you're a much smaller company. Well, how are you delivering this? Well, and the smaller company says, well, I use AI. I have my own AI tools and I use that. And the customer all of a sudden is very positive, and they might get the job. So I do see more more and more smaller companies working with companies like Sektor, perhaps that don't have innovation teams. Think about what we said earlier, is that traditionally, we give firepower to innovation teams. Perhaps something that could be happening is, we are the innovation team of a smaller company that can't afford to have one in-house. And we deliver the service through and through, not just giving firepower.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think that these big kind of consultancies are actually in a little bit of danger with AI, especially when these smaller people who can like literally go onto a software and probably sign up and implement it tomorrow can start eating into their market share. With a big company, they just can't do that. They got to like go through an IT approval process, and no, you can't use ChatGPT because of data, and you can't use WhatsApp and stuff like this. And also, the service offering they're offering is basically still the same outcome, right? It's just
it's the innovator's dilemma. Yeah,
and it's probably accelerated with the advent of AI.
Maybe,
for sure.
Maybe you can, Angelos, expand a little bit on this actually, because you have this unique angle of looking at different technologies, the vendors, providers, and on the other side, the large companies, which also they use a lot of technology really on day-to-day, on the day-to-day basis. Do you see them being endangered in any way?
You mean the big consultancies to be endangered?
Yes, because another like a dilemma is really like how to think about the future. Is it the bigger consultancies becoming bigger and bigger, or perhaps we will be dealing with some sort of decentralization because of AI? So there will be more and more smaller teams, consultants, rather than consolidation into bigger firms.
Yeah, I think we'll see a very different landscape in the consulting space in the next decade or so. It will be very, very different. I do think they are in danger, and I think if they don't transform their services, their business model, the way they charge, now the smaller companies will grow and take over.
Interesting. Yeah, it goes along the lines, lots of various similar conversations I've had with people, and funny enough, conversations with people of these big companies too that are all saying similar things. I think or maybe
threat
it's
is
not
very
so
real.
dramatic.
No. It is quite dramatic. The threat is very real.
Yeah.
The threat is very real because very often the decision comes down to cost. And all right, if it's 2% lower, 3% lower, it doesn't make a difference. But if it's 50% lower or 80% lower, then it makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard for you to completely say, well, I'm not going to pay any attention to these guys. And then, all right, I'm not going to give them the job. I don't trust them. 80% cheaper? No way. But then these guys start getting, more and more work and start seeing them around. And then they come out, they come and bid for your project again the second time. And now all of a sudden you're paying attention. So yeah, I think, look at DeepSeek and OpenAI. The difference was, we're not just talking, okay, it took OpenAI $1 billion and took DeepSeek like 980 million. It took DeepSeek 5.4 million and the other guy's $1 billion. That difference is massive. You can't just, it's shockingly big. You're going to pay attention.
Interesting.
I've got a little bit of a random question. What's the most expensive technology you implemented
Who charges the most? Procore, it's gotta be.
I mean, you don't have to say the name.
No. I think traditionally, project management platforms are expensive. They have a lot of modules. The customer wants a whole product, so I think it just makes sense. It's more natural for that to be more expensive. But we've done some pretty massive deployments of, let's say, point solutions in the many millions. So it's not, sometimes point solutions, are get bigger ticket sizes than let's say a whole solution.
That sounds pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. What's your prediction? Maybe we just touched on it actually, but I can keep the question open. Your predictions for the next 5 years of the industry, Angelos.
I think a lot more use of AI, a lot more automation. I think what we'll start to see in 5 years is which of the jobs that we are fearing today will go away. For instance, I look at job roles such as the job of the project manager, the architect, the civil engineer. I'm like, are these jobs going to be around in 20, 30, 50 years? Or is it just going to be like, I want to build a building here. Here's 15 designs. All right, choose the best design for me to make the most money. Here you go. Build a business case. All right, here you go. Develop all the drawings. Here you go. Tell me how I'm going to manage my budget. Here you go. Give me an automated report every month. Here you go.
Employ 200 robots to get it done.
Yeah.
Now that part, I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know yet.
It'll take longer.
Maybe. It'll take a little longer. I think in the next 5 years, we will see not just the let's say general use of tools like ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini, not just like using it to improve a Word document, but we're going to see automated actions come out of these platforms that help us in our day-to-day lives. I think that's the biggest shift that we will see in the next 5 years. And hopefully what that will translate to is more use of some very useful technologies that exist today that perhaps are too difficult to maximize their use, such as BIM, for instance. BIM is very, very helpful, but very hard to deploy and get adopted, and people need to pay attention, and nobody has time for that. So I think with automation, we hopefully will start to see more use of that.
What about the defensibility of Sektor itself? Why can we not have an AI agent which will implement the technology into persons, right? You said
Sektor will be that agent.
Sektor will be that agent.
There we go. So you you said, what did you say earlier?
Disrupting ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it.
There you go.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
You probably heard me say, 2-3 times, that I'm, let's say, anti the consulting model. I think it hasn't been disrupted at all. I think now is the time to disrupt consulting. I think the customers of consultants are frustrated. You hear people say, "Oh, I love my iPhone," but you don't hear people say, "Oh, I love my consultant."
That's
Yeah.
very, very true.
Not to name a consultant, but you don't hear people going around saying, "Hey, I love my consultant." Nobody's going to say that. But people will like happily wear like a Google hat or an Apple shirt or
Yeah.
stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's where everything begins for Sektor. We think there is a place for outsourced services. But if it's done manually, then you're slow. You're motivated by the wrong factor. You're motivated by man hours rather than being motivated by efficiency
An outcome.
and an outcome. And we really want to change that.
Yeah, actually, thinking about like industry that we in my business, for example, the fact that sometimes it's not pleasant, is that single thing that there's a man hour and there is friction between customers' expectations and consultancy expectations, and it's always about money, right? Because it's about time, which is money in the end of the day. So, and that's actually I'm very bullish on technology in general, like in the long term, in the design space. That I hope that it will be much easier for consultants to save lots of time on their activities, just because the tech will do a lot of, and it will be much better tech that they can like work with. Because there's lots of friction right now. Well, it's always been, I guess, but yeah, just my cup of tea.
Yeah, I think every consulting company should ought to become a tech company.
Should be worried.
How do we do it then?
AI, man.
AI for everything. How do you do it? I think there's, you need to first and foremost understand what, it's kind of, we spoke about the innovator's dilemma earlier, but there's a concept by Clay Christensen, the milkshake example. What is the job that you're hired to do?
Yes.
You need to understand first and foremost, what is the job that your client is hiring you to do? And, a lot of the times, if you're let's say a designer, you might not get, the design is part of the job, but it's not, they might, hire you to mitigate risk, for instance. They might hire you to speed up their project. They might hire you because they don't want to, they don't like their other consultant, whatever. You need to understand what is the job that you're hired to do. And then based on knowing that, then you need to decide what solutions do you develop in-house versus what do you buy externally. And you should be developing tools internally that are centered around your IP, that are critical to delivering the job that you're hired to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, once you do that and once you invest in developing those tools, then I think you can be called a tech company.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Okay, so we wrap this one up.
Maybe last question. I will touch again on the competition here. So I think I've seen. I don't want to say similar companies that you, but because that's not true. But similar model helping larger consultancies to help, like I know you don't provide strategy, but to help provide some sort of strategy and implement things. But is this are there a lot of people trying to do same thing as you do, or what's your view on competition from this angle?
Yeah, I think the space is quite blurry. There are a lot of companies trying to, let's say, consult other companies on digitization.
Mm-hmm.
I think the adoption space is
that's
more
consultant model, right?
Yeah. And I think the adoption space is coming at the customer from all angles, right? The vendor is like, buy professional services from me. And then the consultant is like, no, you buy it from me. And then, there's tools out there that, give you automation, like Monday.com is like, do everything on Monday.com. And, the client's like, oh, what do I do? So I think it's quite blurry as to to the customer at least as to if not these guys, then who would it be? I think for Sektor, it's if not Sektor, then it would be, let's say, a big consultancy. One of the KPMG, Accenture, and so on and so forth. So I think it would be one of those guys.
Mm-hmm. Got it. But would you sell also technology to someone through Sektor, or you don't do that?
No, we don't do that.
Yeah, so I think that's the difference, right? Because some people would offer the technology through them and then provide consulting, which is very, I don't like that.
I don't like that either, because I think it's all about buying direct. I mean, I think both the
what kind of technology is it if you have to buy it through consultant who can help you implement this? Honestly,
it's kind of
doesn't make sense.
I mean, what do
I
I
don't
do?
know. I don't know.
I mean, it has its merits, right? Sometimes I'll go through like kayak.com or Skyscanner and I look at the price, and then I go to the to the website of the airline and buy the and buy the tickets direct.
Because it's cheaper. Because it's cheaper.
I don't know. Sometimes it's not cheaper, but I feel more secure. For instance, I'll see maybe, let's say, a technology on a marketplace, and then I'll go to the tech company direct and buy. And sometimes it's not even cheaper, but I just feel better buying it directly from
the source,
from the source, unless it's Amazon, and I know that the customer support that I get from Amazon is 100 times better than any tech company can give me. So Amazon is doing such a good job with customer support that it actually has the opposite effect. The reason why I say I'll go on kayak, I don't even know. I don't even know if I can get support. If I buy a ticket through kayak.com, can I get support? I feel like I can't. But buying stuff off Amazon, I think they provide the best customer support, and I'm more inclined to buy from them. So I think you're both right, because I saw Owen kind of go, I think you guys are both right.
I'm more right on this one.
No, the perfect anecdote to this is Salesforce, and the Salesforce consultancy is larger than Salesforce itself as the product.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Martin, your theory...
Actually, no. So my theory, what is the real world is proving to be wrong.
No, you're wrong, my friend. The real world is the real world.
Well,
I know you have struggled to accept this.
If majority is not right, doesn't mean I have to stick with them.
Okay,
I think it's a good time to wrap it up, actually.
Yeah. It's not the Martin and Owen show.
Yeah.
Angelos, can you tell people where they could find out more about you?
LinkedIn's the best place to find out more about us. We're currently revamping our website, so it's very confusing if you go there. Come to for the next couple of weeks.
Needs must.
But Sektor AI is the website. If you want to go there, find us on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I post my thoughts very often. We do have exclusive mailing lists, let's say, that go out to our customers or people who just want information and sign up and say, every few months to get updates on what's the latest, greatest tech. And reach out if you're thinking of buying a technology and you're trying to orient yourselves. Like I said earlier in the podcast, we don't charge for that.
Cool. Thanks, Angelos.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.